Hi everyone, welcome to ADEX Pixel Virtual Expo and of course our favorite session in conversation with David Stride, and today we will be having a little discussion with Dr. Matt Carter. Hi everyone, welcome to ADEX Pixel Virtual Expo and of course with Dr. Matt Carter. And just a little bit of information on who is Dr. Matt Carter. I'm sure everybody knows, but he is a marine archaeologist, research director for the Major Project Foundation, vice president of the Australasian Institute for Maritime Archaeology, New Zealand representative for ICOMOS, International Committee on Underwater Cultural Heritage, or for short, ICUCH, and lastly, an international fellow of the Explorers Club. So Matt has actually worked on archaeological projects in 12 different countries, ranging from excavating ancient shipwrecks in the Mediterranean to surveying World War II wrecks in the Pacific since 2006. He has combined archaeological, commercial, and also technical diving for over a decade. And today he likes to focus and, look into his passion, which is to work and protect the marine ecosystem, cultures, and also livelihoods that is threatened by polluting shipwrecks in the Pacific. Here we have none other. I would like to introduce to you the moderator for today, David Stride. David, over to you.
Thank you, Nora. And because it's the Chinese Lunar New Year, do allow me to wish all of our friends and colleagues throughout the Asian region a very happy New Year, and Kung Hee Fat Choi, I think. Matt, it's good to see you again. It's been 2 years since we last met up at ADEX.
Yeah, good to see you too, Strikey. 2 years, it's not that long, but everything that's gone on, it's a really, really long time.
It's been an awful time. And of course, it means that we've missed out on a year of looking for the fortune-telling parrot. Which,
that's right.
You've been one of the original explorers looking for this fictional fortune-telling parrot.
Fictional? No,
it's not really fictional. We'll find it one day. But Matt, thank you very much for joining me. Ladies and gentlemen, Matt hails from New Zealand, but now lives in Australia.
That's correct. So the accent should be on display for the listeners.
And I do have to say, by the way, I'm based in Sydney. Matt's down in Melbourne. Well, hopefully he's down in Melbourne.
Well, I'm actually in Auckland.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm in hotel quarantine.
Oh, Matt, I'm sorry. This will be sort of close to midnight for you there.
Yeah, but it's not a problem. It's well worth waiting up to
naturally,
chat with Strikey, of course. So yeah,
Matt, you're one of the most, to my way of thinking anyway, one of the most fascinating up and coming sort of stars of modern diving. And when did you start?
Well, firstly, that's far too generous. But I started diving back in 2000. High school biology teacher I had was a dive instructor, and he took one of the classes after hours to do our tickets. And I learned to dive up in Christchurch in New Zealand. So cold water, rubbish viz, and loved it. So just kind of went from there.
And I noticed, when I asked for some information, you mentioned about diving in Otago in the harbour in what, a wetsuit in what sort of degree temperature?
Well, that was the thing too. So started diving when I was 16, and then went down to Dunedin in the south of New Zealand to university. So any money I had would spend on beer. So I had this ratty wetsuit with holes everywhere, and it worked okay. But then midwinter, 8 degrees in the harbour. We're actually diving, and it was snowing one day. but just crap viz. And all the diving is kind of in that part is hunter gathering. If you're not chasing crayfish or abalone power, you're wasting your time. So that was kind of my introduction to diving.
Right. And what were you studying at university, by the way?
Well, I started studying economics and politics. And
good.
Yeah, there you go. And now I kind of went a bit sideways. Now I started doing some history and some archaeology, and I kind of had a bit of an epiphany one day and thought, well, if I carry along with economics, I'm going to be in an office for the rest of my life doing numbers. No, I want a little bit more adventure than that. So I did the archaeology, and I was talking to one of my lecturers one day and said, well, who does maritime, who does underwater archaeology in New Zealand? He said, well, there's not really anyone. So, well, okay. And so I looked into it, and there's one other guy. So straight away, I was the second best underwater archaeologist in New Zealand.
So what actually brought you to Australia then?
To do my PhD. So I've kind of worked back and forth between New Zealand and Australia over the years. I did my maritime archaeology degree at Flinders University in Adelaide. So I got a bit of a taste for it there. And then basically the opportunities in New Zealand for underwater, there's just no professional roles. So we've got some amazing shipwrecks, some amazing history, just no one wants to pay you to look at it. So the way around that was to move to Australia and do my PhD on a New Zealand topic. And that way I could get a scholarship to study what I wanted. But
before you did your PhD, I mean, you were studying maritime archaeology before that.
Yep. Yeah, so that was a postgraduate diploma. So I've done a bit of time at uni. I've done
really? Right.
I've done an honours, a postgrad diploma, a master's, and a PhD. So some would say I'm institutionalised.
Yeah, and you got the PhD last year, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
So the title doctor.
Yep, signed, sealed, deliver early last year. So that was good to have off the shoulders. So I could actually start sleeping at night and enjoying life a little bit more. So
yeah, I mean, what a great achievement to follow through.
Yeah, well, no, I really appreciate the accolade there. But yeah, again, it's the first PhD in maritime archaeology in New Zealand history. So again, now gone from number 2 to number 1. Wow. So yeah.
And of course, sort of early on, when I think possibly when we first sort of met, you were one of the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society scholars.
That's right, and that's, I guess, where things really took off for me. So 2009, I'd done a little bit of maritime archaeology, but kind of domestically, so Australia and New Zealand. And then I applied for the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society Australasian Rolex Scholar, which is a hell of a mouthful. But basically, I applied for it with absolutely no hope in getting it. I thought there's absolutely no way I'm ever going to get this. There hadn't been a Kiwi who'd got it. There'd never been a maritime archaeologist. And Favour smiled on me, and I managed to get it. And with that, I mean, that just kick-started and opened so many doors. So I worked in 9 different countries in 2009 to 2010, travelled all around the world, connected with some of the leading maritime archaeologists.
And that was organised through the OW?
Through the scholarship. Yeah. So with that scholarship,
Jane sort of took you under her wing and
absolutely.
Sort of mentored you and
So for those who don't know, the scholarship involves a year's travel working in your field of interest. So basically, under the guidance of Jane and various other people, Jane Jenkins, travelled around the world and got all these amazing experiences. So if you're under 25 or you know someone who's under 25 in the diving industry, just apply for it. Even if you think you've got absolutely no chance, like I did, just apply, and you never know, it could change your life.
No, I mean, there have been some most amazing people going through, yourself included, of course.
All these other people,
But that's also, through that, you took up, for want of a better term, technical diving, rebreather diving.
Yep, absolutely. That was my first taste to anything technical diving wise. And I was kind of, I guess, like a lot of young or kind of introductory divers. Why would you want all that equipment? What's the point in going deeper? And then I started, I guess, building into it, doing decode procedures, advanced nitrox, open circuit, and just getting more time underwater with twin tanks and being able to visit deeper sites more. And in terms of shipwrecks, it makes absolutely perfect sense because generally speaking, the deeper the shipwrecks are, the better preserved they are. So when you're in the single tank 18 meter zone, a lot of them are smashed to bits. You go down to 30 to 40 and you get this completely different experience. So I was absolutely hooked on that. I guess using the technical diving as a tool to get me to these deeper shipwrecks, that was really the amazing.
Well, that's what it is anyway, isn't it? It is a tool to. It's the bus that carries people to where they want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fortunate thing for me is I did that training up in the Great Lakes, up in Lake Michigan, with Tamara Thompson, who's a bit of a renowned instructor and also a maritime archaeologist up there. So
I was
working
the Wisconsin
Historical Society. Yeah. And for any of the viewers or listeners who haven't seen Great Lake shipwrecks, just Google it, after this, obviously, but Google it, and these shipwrecks, they're just incredibly intact. Wooden, sitting up on the bottom, at the mast still standing, this kind of like Disney shipwreck. And, beautiful.
Becky Kagan shot, in fact, a lot of her images are just beautiful ones of some of the wrecks that have sunk in the Great Lakes. But you had the opportunity to dive we were talking earlier, the SS Lakeland, wasn't it?
Yep, that's right. So it was
the SS Lakeland, please.
Well, for a start, it was a car ferry. So in the 1920s, I believe. So when it was sailing, it was absolutely stacked full of cars, and it sank. And so when you're diving on it today, it's split open and there's cars sitting off to the side of these like not Model Ts, but kind of these antique, beautiful cars. So it's an incredible dive in itself. And when you start looking back at the actual history of the dive, it was one of the birthplaces of trimix diving in the world. And I forget the exact details of dates and things like this, but the diving that was done when it sank, the salvage work was just this incredible story of, I think it's the first use of trimix in the US. So, amazing.
Really? And that was the US Navy divers?
I believe so.
The Navy.
I really should have read up on this before.
I know this because here comes the big plug.
Yeah.
That contributed a wonderful recipe for the Dining with Divers cookbook, and including, of course, the story of a memorable dive, which was the SS Lakeland.
Yep, absolutely. So, yes, that's how I know it. Now, if people were interested, Strikey, where could they get a copy of that book?
It's available on Amazon, by the way.
Is that what you told me to say? I tried to write on my head. No, it's a great story and great cookbook as well. And that's one of the things.
Back to the Great Lakes. So, how many vessels did you? What were the range of vessels that you would have dived on with?
We were concentrating a lot on the wooden vessels, and there's amazing because there's a transition from sail to steam and from wood to steel. And the thing is, like wooden shipwrecks, wooden ships became obsolete in a lot of parts of the world. They got replaced by steamships. Right. But in the Great Lakes, they still actually held their value because they could take really bulky cargoes like grain or timber, which, it's not perishable, so you didn't need to be in a rush. So you get these huge, just like wooden ships, which they just wouldn't work anywhere else in the world. And they're on the lake bed, and you're diving and you're down there, just kind of dwarfed by the structure of these ships. It's absolutely incredible. And the preservation is, it's beautiful.
What sort of depths were you diving there, man?
Well, the thing is, when I first went there, it was I was still on a single tank, so we're diving 15 to 18 meters. But then after that, when I started doing the technical training, the rebreather training through to our trimix, I think the deepest we did was 66, 70 meters. And, that's incredibly intact and so still, no currents, very little growth on them. And they're just like, you almost don't have to dive a wreck a second time. You dive a wreck, go, it's the best dive I've ever done. Go to the next wreck. That's the best dive I've ever done. Go to the next one. They're just that incredible. So,
and what sort of visibility? Great, brilliant visibility.
On a lot of them, 25, 30 plus meters of visibility. So that's just, incredible. And the water's cold and clear. And one of the reasons is they're so well preserved is at the bottom it can be about 4 degrees. So, dry suits and dry gloves are pretty important. Yeah. But 4 degrees is about the temperature of your fridge. So in terms of preservation, it's perfect for preserving these kind of shipwrecks. And we were diving on one of them called the Lakeland, the Samuel B. Weller, or I can't remember the exact name, but we were doing the survey of it, and we'd put the tape measure down, and what you do is you bang a nail into the wood to attach the tape to. This is all under permit, so it's all legit. But you pull the tape measure out, and I was banging the nail in, and the very tip of my dry glove got between the hammer and the nail. But I had a hole in my dry glove. I think it was at 55 meters, 4 degrees water. I'm like, oh no, this is like the situation. So it stayed down until my hand was, a lump of wood. It was just completely frozen. But it was definitely a trick for new players, that one.
Yeah. So, and after that, you came back. You then got your master's degree in maritime archaeology. Were there many of you doing it?
No. So basically, I was doing that on my own back in New Zealand. My supervisor was just, a land-based, a dirt archaeologist, as we might call them, but a little bit derogatory, but and he was really supportive though. So there's just no one coming through in New Zealand at the time. So it's the first masters in maritime archaeology as well, and kind of from there was looking at work, job options and things like that, and there weren't a lot around in New Zealand, and that's when I actually started working up in Darwin Harbour for a project up there for 8 months, which was a very interesting experience. Yeah. So,
what were you diving on there?
Well, it's an amazing place because
there's the USS Peary, isn't there?
That's right. There's a whole range of shipwrecks in there and plane wrecks from the Japanese attack in 1942, 41, 42. And so at the bottom of the harbour, there's all this amazing World War II history. And they were putting in a big liquid gas refinery there. So basically they were putting in an enormous pipeline through the harbour, and the company needed to be able to prove that this was the condition of all these shipwrecks and planes before they did it and after, to show that they didn't destroy them. So I was working on an archaeology project up there, but it was all commercial diving. So it was all the hard hats and the full face mask and things like that. But for some international listeners who might not know Darwin Harbour, Darwin's renowned for its saltwater crocodiles. It's tiger sharks. And the thing is, when we signed up to the work,
anything nasty.
Yeah, you had to sign this waiver, and it was kind of one of those things. It was like page 1, page 2, page 3 of all the risks that were there, and at least of it was unexploded ordnance. That bombed the living hell out of Darwin, and so there's all these bombs. And one of the things that we were looking for was unexploded bombs, but there was areas of the harbour which they'd use to grow pearls. And what you do to grow pearls is you fill a 44-gallon drum with concrete, put it on the bottom, and put a wire up in it grows up the wire. But a 44-gallon drum full of concrete is the exact same magnetic signature as a depth charge. So they ran this magnetometer over part of the harbour, and it's like the whole thing was like Fort Knox. It was like looked like there was explosives everywhere. So it was our job to record those drums and lift them, get them out of the way as well. So that was a very interesting part of the world to work in.
It would be, and I'm going to sort of, I don't like doing this, but I am reminded of a story when they were doing the clearance on the USS Peary, and a very good friend of mine, Bill Fitzgerald, who was the former chief of the Royal Australian Navy, they were there doing the clearance on the USS Peary and the torpedo tubes, and they would swim into the torpedo tubes that were loaded, and hopefully the vanes hadn't turned too much that would act as the detonator. So two of them went down, and Bill indicated his mate should swim into the torpedo tube, check the vanes on the propeller in there. And Bill thought, what shall I do? And he picked up a deck stanchion and went whack on the side of the tube. And he said, this guy came out backwards out of the tube so quickly. It was unbelievable. But, I digress there. Mate, so you got back from... When did you do the commercial? You did a commercial diving course as well.
Yeah. So that was... did my first kind of initial course in 2010, 2011, I think. And then I did my full-on hard hat surface supply in 2013. Yeah.
Right. Whereabouts?
Yeah. In Albury. And,
right.
Yeah, so there's a place in there called the Pit, which is and it's interesting stuff. But the crazy thing is like the main reason I did the commercial side of things was for to work as a maritime archaeologist. So you need to have qualifications like the academic qualifications, but then also the diving ones for that. And there's no way of getting kind of like a specific scientific diving ticket. Well, there wasn't back then. So it's like, well, I want to do scientific diving, but the commercial course is the full-on, underwater gas axes, chainsaws, 1,000 kg lift bags and all this stuff. So it was incredibly fun.
You were actually sort of covering everything that you would have probably needed to do anyway.
Well, I don't know how often I'll use those ones, but it's everything I kind of dreamed of. You've got this massive chainsaw. Yeah.
That was a superb area though, that pit at Albury.
Yeah, it's perfect for that kind of diving. And there's sunken cars, and you've got to do like rescue scenarios and things like that. And your buddy always ties their umbilical in the most complicated way possible. You're kind of pulling them out,
and of course it's brilliant clear visibility there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. yeah.
Oh, lovely. And then you went overseas. You've been to the Med, you've been to Qatar. What were you doing over there in the Med?
So the Mediterranean work was when I was on the scholarship, so back in 2009. Right. And Texas A&M University out of the States, they're one of the leaders in maritime archaeology worldwide, and they've been working in the Med since basically the 50s or the 60s. So they've got a really long reputation there. And anyhow, we were in Spain, and there was this Phoenician ship, so 3,800 years old, and it was sailing from Africa to Spain when it sank. And the thing is, it hit this kind of submerged rock and sank. And it was such a perfectly submerged rock that over the centuries, about 3 or 4 other ships crashed into that same rock and then sunk on top of the ship. So you had this kind of like shipwreck sandwich, basically.
Really?
And then eventually the Spanish Navy came in and said, no, this has sunk too many ships. So they blew the rocks up. So then you had rocks on top of the shipwreck sandwich. So basically they'd spent quite a bit of time taking all those rocks and all these other shipwreck debris off. And eventually we got down to this 3,800-year-old ship. And there was only these tiny little splinters of wood. But the amphora, so the vases, the jugs from antiquity was still there and still intact. You could see the handles and everything. And it was carrying elephant tusks from Africa, this particular ship. And so we're swimming and we're excavating and recording these elephant tusks and raising them to the surface. And they were like, huge things, and it's still intact after 2,800 years. Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, it's the most National Geographic thing I've ever done. It was spectacular.
As a matter of interest, what did they do? The ivory wasn't still usable, was it?
Not usable as in, I guess you wouldn't turn it into a piano, but they took it to a conservation lab at the museum, and they took the salts out because over that time all the salt had gone into it. So they took that out really slowly, and they're on display in the museum. They're actually in these big tanks, kind of this round, this high, with these elephant tusks sitting in them with the salts slowly leaching out of them, and you can walk around them. And one of them actually had Phoenician writing on the tusk, just like basically a load number, 25 elephant tusks or something written on the tusk. So you got that kind of
books.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but no, it was very just amazing stuff. Beautiful part of the world.
Boy, I suppose actual conservation as well must play a vital role in your training.
Well, that's the thing. Like excavation itself in maritime archaeology, it's really rare these days. You just don't get a chance because it is so complicated, basically. The logistics of taking artifacts from underwater and bringing them up, that's easy, bringing them up, but actually conserving them for the future, that's the challenge. And so you've got a lot of stuff on various people's mantelpieces which are flaking to bits. Not that I'm going to cast aspersions, but doing it the archaeological way is a bit more expensive and a bit more scientific, but it definitely can be done. And if it's of high enough significance, it does get done, and that's where you get these beautiful pieces in museums, which everyone can see. So. Yeah,
that's wonderful. And then now you've started then your PhD. Yep.
So after working in Darwin and doing some travelling and also working in Christchurch after the earthquakes there, which was doing dirt archaeology, so we won't spend too much time on that. It was a great experience. But anyhow, I decided, I wanted to go further with the maritime archaeology, and so moved over to Melbourne at La Trobe University and did my PhD. And I was actually looking at early shipbuilding in New Zealand. So basically, from 1790, you had these people coming to New Zealand, these Englishmen via Sydney. They'd come over to New Zealand and they start building ships. So they'd barter for a bit of land, cut down the trees and build these ships. And so I was looking at this kind of relationship between how they were doing it and what was going on at the time. So in New Zealand, you obviously had the indigenous people, the Māori people, who were here first, and were here in far, far greater numbers than your flat-footed Englishmen popping over from Sydney. So you got this really crazy dynamic where there's huge amounts of money to be made. They needed to build ships. There's a massive lack of shipping in this part of the world, but it's also a very risky business. And if you annoy the chief whose land you're borrowing, he's just going to burn your ship to the ground and kill you. So you're in a pretty precarious position. But this went on, between 1792 and 1840, when the treaty was signed. Dozens of boats were being built in this really kind of colonial frontier. So that's kind of where my PhD was. It was really quite an academic study and has very, very little to do with diving. But I find it really fascinating. And while I was doing my PhD, one of the great things is that Melbourne, it's kind of like a hidden diving gem. Any diver from Melbourne will tell you all about it, but there's some amazing diving there. Especially in the technical ranges. So you've got...
there's the ship's graveyard.
That's right. Yeah. So you've got all these amazing ships, like they're all scuttled, but you've also got these great wall dives. So where the bay comes out, you've got these walls that drop off to 100 metres or so. And just beautiful, unexpectedly beautiful. So whenever I could possibly take a day off uni or, skip class, I'd be out diving on
and you're using a rebreather.
That's right. Yeah. Yep. So that's one of the areas I really want to push as a maritime archaeologist as well, is that in this part of the world, Australia and New Zealand, no one else is technical diving in terms of maritime archaeology. No one's diving a rebreather. So I've been pushing that. Which has been amazing as well.
I would have thought, sort of given the depths of some of the things, it was an essential tool for.
Yeah. Well, one of the challenges is that 30 metres is kind of the cutoff for a lot of institutions, a lot of scientific diving. So a rebreather is kind of surplus if you're, well, it's not really, but if you're only going to 30 metres, it's not as necessary as if you're going deeper. But what that means is that there's literally thousands of shipwrecks deeper than 30 metres that maritime archaeologists aren't looking at. So I'm like, wow, I'll take those ones then. You guys can have the shallow ones. I'll take these deeper ones.
And what this sort of leads on then to the M24. What sparked your interest in, and you best explain what the M24 was, etc.
Yes, so the M24 it is a Japanese midget submarine, and what a lot of people don't know is that Australia was really involved in the Second World War. Basically, there were Japanese submarine attacks all along the coast, German merchant raiders, so we're coming down, laying mines, and a lot of people don't realise just how involved or close the war was. And there's the story that the war came to Sydney in was it May 1941? 42. Yeah, and I'm glad one of us has got their thinking cap on there straight. And there's attack on Sydney Harbour. 3 full mother submarines came along with these little midget submarines attached, and they launched the midget submarines from outside the harbour. They came in, caused havoc. 2 of them were sunk within the harbour, and one of them, the M24, fired its torpedoes at an American cruiser, light cruiser, the Chicago. Yeah, and missed, fortunately, but unfortunately it hit a converted ferry that had sailors in it. So I think the Cuttable, yep. So killing 20-odd sailors, and then turned tail and scarpered out of the harbour, never to be seen again until David Strike. Now, some people would call it, I guess, an early form of false advertising, potentially.
There's a piece of sandstone on the bottom of Sydney Harbour that is shaped exactly like a midget submarine.
Yes. And so this was...
Carry on.
So this was discovered, the sandstone submarine was discovered at some point, and with great pomp and ceremony, but it turned out that was not, in fact, the M24. But the M24 itself, no one knew where it was until 2007, I believe, and a recreational group found it, 56 metres diving on air, I believe, single tanks on air. But, that's maybe what was going on in 2007. And but yeah, it'd been this massive mystery in Australian maritime history. Where did the submarine go? It could only get so far. 2007, they'd found it. 56 metres is too deep for traditional maritime archaeology. As I said before, 30 metres is that cutoff. So no professional maritime archaeologists had ever dived it. And we set up a project to use rebreathers and photogrammetry, which I'll explain a bit more in a minute, to record it in detail that's never been done. So this is pretty cutting edge for Australian maritime archaeology. And through our membership of the Explorers Club, we applied for a Explorers Club flag. And so the Explorers Club flag comes out of New York, out of the Explorers Club of New York. You apply for it, and if they think your project has sufficient merit in this terms of scientific exploration, then they award you this flag to take on the expedition. And we were fortunate enough to be awarded this flag. So it was coming up to the 75th anniversary of the sinking, and we were really eager to get out on the site. And so we called up the indomitable David Strike and Peter Fields to help us get out there. So we went out, I think it was in May, just before the anniversary, and myself and my dive buddy Steve Travis, we were doing the diving, and Peter Fields was doing the skippering, and Strikey was excellent at dropping and raising the anchor in exactly the right place. So, that was the most important job, to be honest, because another time...
If only.
Well, the thing is, it's such a small site. It's only 24 metres long and 3 metres wide. If you put the shot line in the wrong place, you completely miss it, and bad enough viz. So, we dived it and made this beautiful 3D model of it. And, it was this Explorers Club flag expedition. So, it was an incredible experience. I guess for
and
us,
you went back then with the other guys, with Gideon and... Yeah.
So, basically, I guess that kind of it segues into a bit of another story. Basically, when I was doing my PhD as well, I got called up and asked if I'd like to do some TV work over in New Zealand. And
of course,
there's a show called Coast, which some of you may have seen, and it came out of the UK. Some 13 seasons in the UK. They were coming to New Zealand, and they were looking for a marine archaeologist. So I said, "Yeah, let's do this." So worked on that for 3 seasons over in New Zealand, telling shipwreck stories and diving around the place. And I was talking to the main guy, the main presenters.
Neil Oliver,
the Scotsman. Again, some of you may know him. And anyhow, I was telling him about this midget submarine project. He said, "Oh, that would make a great episode for Coast Australia." I was like, "Well, okay, you guys have got my number," And so, got a call, and they said, "Well, we've seen what you did on the first dive. How about we sort it out, and we'll sort you out for another one?" It's like, "Yep, absolutely." So we had a whole team. Ed Stockdale, some of you may know, Gideon from Singapore, Gideon Liu, Steve Travis, cameraman Johnny DeCecco went up there, and we dived and recorded the wreck again in more detail for this TV show, Coast Australia. And that actually just came out on Monday in Australia. So it's on History Channel. So again, that was a real buzz to have, people interested in our work and having it on that kind of that level of TV or profile. So that was really cool.
What was the photogrammetry that you did? This allowed you to build this sort of wonderful 3D model. A virtual.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's this amazing technology called photogrammetry, and basically you take thousands of photos or video from all different angles around an object, and then run it through some 3D modeling software called Agisoft Metashape is the software I use. And the thing is, it's not rocket science. It's not that difficult to do. I'm not a computer guru, and I can make it work. And the thing is, it works on land, but it also works underwater. And the exciting thing about underwater is it's just opening up this amazing kind of opportunity, because when we're diving, we've got limited bottom time. No matter if it's shallow, you're still limited. The deeper you go, the more limited your bottom time is. So essentially, this offers us a way of recording these wrecks faster and more accurately than ever before, which for maritime archaeology is just incredible. And a lot of other divers, like technical divers, photographers, are getting into it as well, which is amazing. So, we used this on the Japanese midget sub, and we made the first ever accurate 3D model of the sub. So it was a great result.
I should explain it. It is a war grave, isn't it? So
that's right. So I guess
members are still sort of entombed.
Yeah, and one of the challenges with that too was that it is a protected zone. So basically, you're not allowed within 500 metres of it without a permit from. You need a permit from the Australian government, and you also need a bit of a nod from the Japanese government to say, yep, and that's, I guess, where one of the advantages of being a maritime archaeologist is that I've got the track record to say, yep, this is, we're not going to take parts off it or anything like that. So that's one of the real standouts of the project as well, was coming at it from that archaeological perspective.
That actually sort of leads on to the next bit, because you're also now a director of the Major Projects Foundation.
Yeah. So
that's one of your tasks, is what happens when ships and wrecks start to decay and fall to bits.
Yeah, and it's something which hasn't actually had a lot of attention. So traditionally, maritime archaeologists, we've been more interested in our older wooden shipwrecks or colonial shipwrecks and things. And the more recent World War II, or even more recent, hasn't really factored in as much. So basically, I work for an organisation called the Major Projects Foundation, and my day job, my day-to-day, is investigating World War II shipwrecks, especially up throughout the Pacific, and looking at what risk they pose to the marine environment. So, off the top of your head, okay, they're just ships. What harm are they going to do? There's no harm. But when you start drilling down into it and actually doing the investigation, is that some of them still have like really large quantities of oil, heavy fuel oil, which is incredibly toxic. On top of that, you've got unexploded ordnance and various other heavy metals and things like that. And no one's really got a clear idea where the shipwrecks are, what's in them, and what risk they pose. So that's what we are investigating.
And what sort of happens there? What, in terms of getting rid of the oil, the ordnance?
Yep.
The Major Projects Foundation, are they actually coming up with sort of solutions?
Yeah, so internationally, it's a huge issue. There's around 8,000 of what we call potentially polluting shipwrecks throughout the world's oceans. So literally thousands and thousands of these. And in some places like the Baltic, all around the UK, the US, the governments are really proactive about this stuff. They go, well, it's actually not good that we've got this shipwreck that's leaking oil into this marine reserve. We need to do something about it. And what they can do for the likes in the UK is they'll send out a massive research vessel, survey it to within an inch of its life, and then if it requires it, they'll send down divers or an ROV. They drill a hole into the fuel tanks and pump it out, which works nicely if you've got the money. The places that we're talking about are the Solomon Islands, Papua New Guinea, Micronesia, Marshall Islands. These countries, they're not rich. They don't have $5 million, minimum. Well, not quite minimum. Yeah. It's complicated, but they don't have $5 million to pump the oil out of each shipwreck. So what we're doing for a start is assessing, what's going on, which shipwrecks are the highest risk, and then working with local authorities and saying, hey, did you know you've got a shipwreck just there? And the answer is normally no. It's like, do you know that all the predictions suggest the oil is going to wash up into this vulnerable area? Also no. So we're working with them to put plans around how they can respond to that as quickly as possible. So if they've got the resources, that might involve putting one of those booms up and protecting the beach from the oil coming on. If they don't have that technology, then at least having access to wheelbarrows and spades so they can get the oil off the beach as quickly as possible so it doesn't wash in, kill everything, wash out, kill everything, wash back in and kill everything again. So it's pretty, I guess, tailored to the where we're working. You've got to be realistic. The ideal situation would be someone would come in and just pump it out. That would be the ideal. And it might happen down the track, but in the short term, we're making these concrete plans for how they can minimise the impact of those spills.
What are the major sort of areas? I take it sort of Truck Lagoon.
Yeah, yep. So Truck, that's got 20-odd shipwrecks which are on our radar out of, it's about 65 to 75 shipwrecks in Truck Lagoon. So an incredible number of shipwrecks, but not all of them are environmental threats to a high level. So we're looking at 20 of them, which is still, it's still quite a lot in a small area.
Yeah.
Bikini Atoll. I've got satellite footage of leaking oil from the wrecks up there as recently as the end of last year.
Nuclear.
Yeah. Yep. So it's a real mess, basically. Yeah, they filled them up with different volumes of oil and ordnance to make it like an active an active fleet.
Oh.
And yeah, that's pretty. And also you're looking at these warships. Yeah, I think one of them, the Prinz Eugen, had 850 different compartments which they pumped oil out of. So compare that to, say, a Japanese merchant ship, which might have 6 fuel tanks or 8 fuel tanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so much more complicated. And all the ships in Bikini are former Navy ships, so they are of that really modular design. So if a torpedo hit it, it's not going to fracture all your tanks.
What sort of depth of water are you looking at operating in there?
Well, the problem is the shallow wrecks are the ones that get hit the most by storm surges and in places like ICUCH, divers as well. So you get hundreds of divers come through and kick it and bubbles and all the rest of it. So the shallow one's the most vulnerable, but they're still leaking down at 400, 500 meters. So we're looking at the top ones that we've got access to by diving more so. But yeah, it's a big problem, and there's a lot of shipwrecks out there.
What are the resources at your disposal there? Obviously, there's a vessel, but
so Major Projects Foundation, it's kind of built around our ship, the RV Ocean Recovery, and it's the former New Zealand Navy diving vessel. So it's 45 metres long. It's got a chamber. It's got a diving bell, 15-ton crane. It's an amazing
asset. A diving bell.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. But the problem is that the cost of getting it from, it's based in Newcastle where the foundation is, of moving it around without having, I guess, the resources to keep it moving is the challenge. So at the moment we're building the boat, getting that kind of ready to go, and doing smaller initial surveys. So we were up in ICUCH in 2019. We started then, and then COVID hit. So it's a lot more desk-based stuff at the moment.
And where's the funding coming from for that?
So that's the thing, is we've got one of the directors, Paul Adams. So this is his kind of baby, and he's pulled it all out of his pocket so far, and which is it's a fair chunk of money. But we're looking for external funding. That's the thing. So I'm applying for grants. We're doing a lot of building relationships with various organisations for various governments. Yeah. And the problem is all the Pacific governments that we're working with have all signed letters of support saying this is an incredible problem. We don't have the resources to deal with it. And it's like, so let's get those resources, And the problem is they can't harness it. So we're having to do this as a charity. We're a not-for-profit charity, because the governments can't afford to do it themselves. So we've had to go sideways and try to do it from a different way.
And how many people, so presumably you are the lead sort of maritime archaeologist?
Yep. So I'm in charge. That's right. So I'm in charge of research for the foundation, and essentially, apart from me, I'm paid. This is my job. Yeah. We've got about 25 volunteers in various different guises after that. So at the moment it's a labour of love for a lot of people, and the hours I put in are significantly more than what I get paid for. Let's put that way.
And what other? So apart from that, you've done the first survey trip to record the leaking wrecks in Truck Lagoon as well.
Yep.
And how did you say?
What was that? Sorry.
How many vessels were leaking there?
Well, there's 20 on our radar up there. Not all of them are leaking. Various ones are leaking at different times, but the problem is just because they're not leaking doesn't mean that they don't have oil in the tank still. So we were up there in 2019, and one of the great things about this is Shipwrecks Lagoon. It's such a world famous diving destination that various people are really keen to kind of get involved to protect the wrecks as well. So we've got a bit of a partnership with Pete Mesley of Lust for Us Tours. So we're 3D modelling some of the wrecks up there. He was up there same year, end of 2019, 3D modelling some of the wrecks as well. And it's a really great tool to get an understanding of what condition they're in for a start. So it's basically we're trying to work with everyone we can to get this information as quickly as possible. And Pete's been really generous in sharing that information.
And what about the munitions on board?
Yeah, so that's it's a bit of a challenge. Getting an idea of what's there for a start, and the most comprehensive munitions survey we've actually done is HMAS Perth up in Indonesia. So that's a bit outside of our kind of traditional focus in the Pacific. But we're working on a project with a doctor out of University of Sydney. She's doing a lot of work with various authorities in Indonesia to do with Perth, and we were invited along to actually assess the ordnance risk. Now, one of the great things about major projects is there's a lot of people out there who are passionate and have time and experience. So we've got a guy who's a retired Canadian clearance diver. And so he worked clearance diving for years and years and years up in some pretty hot places in Canada for ordnance, and then moved into more desk-based assessment and running really large-scale projects. So long story short is that we went through all the information available on HMAS Perth and went through this ordnance list of everything that could go wrong, from touch this, it could blow up, through to don't touch this, but when it corrodes, it's going to release picric acid, which burns your skin off. So there's some nasty stuff, but we're not trying to catastrophize it either. It's a genuine problem, and until you start assessing the stuff, you don't actually know the scale. So we're not saying don't go to Truck Lagoon. That's ridiculous, because I'm going there. I'm going there the next chance I can and diving these wrecks. But what we are saying is be careful, and just
don't
because
these things with a hammer.
That's right. Yeah, and just because the information doesn't exist doesn't mean they're not still full of oil, and that bomb down there is still not a threat. So we're trying to get that information to put it together.
Yeah. How do you feel, just as a matter of interest, there's been over the years a lot of controversy, a lot of discussion about whether items should be removed from wrecks by divers that discover them. How do you feel about that?
Well, it's a difficult one. I think it's like I've dived on a couple of wrecks where the bell is still there, and for me that is incredible. If you're diving a wreck and the bell's still there, it's so much more exciting for me to see it in its place than on old mate's mantelpiece. So that kind of thing, I'm about leaving it there. What I think maritime archaeologists have failed to do is work collaboratively with the diving community as much as they could have in the past. So, for example, you've got divers going out to these wrecks 100, 200 times more frequently than the maritime archaeologists can get out and dive it themselves. What it would be a good situation is that we'd work more closely and say someone finds a new wreck or finds some artifacts are uncovered, then talk to the maritime archaeologist and say, well, should we leave it there or should we bring it up? And there's good arguments for both, but it has to be done in a controlled way, because once it's moved, that information's lost forever. So, photos, video, and those kind of things. But then also moving into the deeper shipwrecks, there's just not enough maritime archaeologists who can dive to those depths to work there before the ship's going to collapse. So that's a whole nother element as well, that time sensitivity. So, and to sum that into a couple of words, just leave it for a start and talk to a maritime archaeologist. My email's here.
It must be so tempting, though, if you saw a bell sitting there.
Yeah. It was amazing, though, just seeing it sitting there. I was like, wow. And knowing, because the thing is, sometimes it's not even that challenging. You get the bell to the surface, and it's just because you got there first. It's not actually that technical or that challenging to get. No. It's just you happen to stumble across it. So
you're not really a fan of people that hop in the water with carrying a crowbar and a mallet.
No. Well, the thing is too is then it takes it out of circulation as such. If it's in someone's garage or the thing, then no one gets to see it. Where at least if it's done, with the idea of putting it where people can see it. So, for example, again, the HMAS Perth, the bell was recovered from that and is now in, I think it's in the Maritime Museum in Sydney.
Right.
And so So, that's a really important object for all the people whose family died on that vessel.
Yeah.
It's better in the museum than it is sitting on the seafloor in Indonesia, especially when it's been illegally salvaged, a lot of the ships, so it could have been lost forever. And again, that's a whole nother complication to add to it. But, if it can be brought into a museum where people can enjoy it, can see it, and it's meaningful, that's powerful stuff.
Yeah. And last year, you were doing a survey of New Zealand's oldest European shipwreck.
Yes, that's right. Yes, so that was incredible. So basically, there's a shipwreck, the Endeavour. So sailed over to New Zealand in 1792.
The Endeavour.
Yeah, it's called the Endeavour, but it's a different Endeavour.
Oh, it's not Cook.
No. It's been confused with it for quite a few times through history, but it sank down in Fiordland, so the far south of New Zealand, really quite a remote area. And it's been on my bucket list for, ever since I've been a maritime archaeologist, even before. And it's amazing because it's kind of like highlight bucket list dive. It's in about 3.5 meters of water. So, my technical training, it's out the window. Don't need that crap. But, single tank, still doing an hour and a bit dives on it. And, finally got to it in July last year for a documentary. We were filming for a museum, the Early Settlers Museum out of Dunedin. Right. And the episode hasn't come out yet, but I'll put it on my Facebook and various and share it around. But it was an incredible experience. Big ballast mound, timbers still sticking out of it, and it took a little bit of an archaeological kind of imagination. Some divers were like, "What's this?" But as a professional, as such, you look at it.
It's a lovely thing to do, though.
Yeah, it was incredible. And the great thing, it was a friend of mine. It's his museum. Well, but he works for the museum, so I was working with some good friends of mine, and brought together this amazing project. So it was a good experience.
Oh, what a wonderful sort of, and I guess you get wrapped in the history of the vessel and the crew and the people, what they were about. So that would be wonderful. There was a question asked very early on, and from Miko.
Hello, Miko.
And I don't think he could have heard properly. The question was, what's marathon archaeology?
Marathon archaeology.
I think he might have misheard maritime.
Maybe. But, you could call it marathon archaeology from the time you start writing out the permit applications through to when you actually finish the final report. Yeah. That's a bloody marathon. As he knows, we're working together on through his organisation, Bottom Line Projects. There's a US submarine off Thailand that we're trying to get out to, and it's been a marathon so far. We applied for the permit a couple of years ago, and we're meant to be out there last year.
Legato.
Yep, the Legato. Yeah, but then COVID kind of has scuttled that for a while. But
that would be a great sort of. You take Richie Kohler with you.
Well, he's in talks as well. Yep, definitely. Yeah.
And then afterwards, you can go back to Singapore and carry out a hunt for the fortune-telling parrot.
That's right. Yeah.
I think we've come to the almost to the end of the time, haven't we, Nora?
Yeah.
Yes, we have 1 minute more.
Oh, right. Well, let me thank Matt very much for staying up so late in Auckland and
not a problem.
Taking the trouble to chat. It really was so good to catch up with you again.
You too, Strikey. That hour just flew by. I can't believe it.
I mean, it has been 2 years.
Yeah, well.
Since that last ADEX when we were all there. God, does time fly when you're not having fun?
Yes.
So thanks once again. So hopefully we will catch up sort of soon.
Absolutely.
And next time you're over, I must try and make the effort to get up to Newcastle if I may.
Yep. Standing invitation.
Yeah,
absolutely. No, thanks for having me, and thanks for ADEX for putting this on. It's a lot of fun, and I hope the audience enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
I'm sure too, Dr. Matt. I think whatever you shared is something really new, especially marathon archaeology. Let's not like pull Nico's leg a little bit. So, David, maybe you would like to introduce the next session. I'm just going to flash the poster, and then maybe we can tell a little bit more about next speaker next week. Just give me a moment.
We're staying with the shipwreck theme next week, and it's with Barry McGill. So hopefully Barry's even sitting there even as we speak, surrounded by snow probably, part of the world, and looking forward to next week. So yeah, look forward to that. But Nora, thank you once again. Matt, thank you. You take care of yourself, mate, and hopefully we'll catch up soon. And Nora, Kong Hee Fat Choi.
Well, I don't celebrate, but to all the Mandarin, or I would say Mandarin, but Chinese ADEX followers, I think every one of us would like to wish happy Chinese New Year. New as in Mandarin is called, it's ox or cow. So apparently this year is going to be a great year, hopefully. And we hope, of course, that all of us be able to travel maybe sometime this year and, come to ADEX for 2020.
Come to see you soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Nora, thank you. Matt, thank you once again.
Thank you, Strikey.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.